Well, hello and welcome to episode number 367 of the Plane Talking UK podcast. I'm Carlos, and in this week's show, London Heathrow may be diverting flights to save on the queues, a Concorde has its nose moved, and staying on the subject of noses, a passenger receives a fine for blowing their nose on a blanket. And in the military this week, Germany are set to replace their ageing P3s with P8s. A pilot wins an award for a very challenging landing, and Armando brings us his take on roundup about the forthcoming EAA Air Venture over in the US. So joining me this week, as always, over in the PTUK studios, keeping all the tech running very smoothly, is of course Matt Smith.
I always enjoy your optimism there. It's greatly appreciated, as to be said. Yes, we're on air. We'll take that as a win this week.
I know. It's nice to see you in the studio, Matt. How are things in there? Warm?
Yes, absolutely. Well, mind you, it's a bit chilly today, isn't it? Let's be honest. So it's a nice place to be this evening. It's when the sun comes out, it'll probably be slightly warmer than before, especially with our recent upgrades in here. There's a lot more things to kick out heat in here than there was before. So yeah, I'll be asking for an air conditioning unit next.
I'll get you a desk fan.
Thank you very much. You're very kind.
I know, very kind.
You know how to spoil me, don't you?
Oh, I know. I've got one in the cupboard here, waiting to go around yours, actually. So.
Oh, good. Right.
And joining us from his glorious studios in sunny Buckinghamshire, well, I think it's sunny today, is, of course, Neville Bounds.
It is a very sunny day. Good evening and hello to everybody. And we are off to Portugal, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to say, thank goodness. So all the travel mucking about that's gone on today, is it on, is it off? But finally, there's some travel allowed to certain parts of Europe from Monday. So that's great news. And that suits me very nicely because Mrs. Nev and I are off to Portugal the first week of July. So
wow.
All being well, we shall be in the Algarve as long as nothing changes or they start mucking about again. But yeah,
I did see your social media post on Facebook earlier today, Nev, with your joy of the gates opening up.
You could tell my keenness, couldn't you? Yes,
indeed. Any news from a business perspective, though, Nev? I mean,
not really. We're not really allowed to fly, I don't think, on company business until June. But of course, that's all. I mean, where I would be going would be Sweden, but unfortunately, their infection rates are rather high at the moment. So, I don't know quite where we're going to end up there. So that's going to be. I would think it's going to be September before we can travel properly. But we'll just see what the company says and. We'll see how we do.
A changeable picture, I think, is the best answer to
that.
Hopefully,
say on the weather forecast.
I mean, let's be honest,
you can
Matt.
Remember back that far.
We need things to get back to normal, so Nev can get some passenger experience segments back in.
Yes, yeah, I'm seriously short of content now. Yeah. So I need to get back on the plane somehow.
Yeah, the highlights packages are now exhausted. Yeah.
So Armando is missing again this week, but he has a very, very valid excuse indeed this evening, because as we are doing this show, Armando is in a sim, having lots of fun in a sim, I will say, because he's been sending me messages on WhatsApp, just rubbing it in that he's in a lovely, awesome sim flying around everywhere. So we miss you, Armando, but hopefully he'll be back on the show next week. But he has sent in the entire military segment for this week.
I know, I'm so excited about that because somebody who knows what they're talking about will be doing the military this week.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
But we have got a guest joining us on the show this week. We're going to speak to in just a moment, but we have got some housework to do before we start our talk with our guests. So it's quick apology actually from me to Nick Codling, one of our listeners, who I missed last week on the Patreon list. Dear. Totally my fault. I don't know. It was a mad rush last week to get the Patreon list to the guys, and I missed Nick off. So apologies to Nick. I did speak to Nick a few days ago, but he's very kindly actually sent us some audio feedback into the show, and Matt's got that ready to play. And it's all about a certain aircraft that he saw flying over his home this week. So if you've got that, Matt.
Hello everyone, this is Nick Codling down in Devon in the southwest of the UK. I have a little bit of feedback about something I thought was interesting that happened today, and I thought I'd share it with you all. I've long had a bit of a Flight Radar 24 addiction, and I really struggle to not pull my phone out every time I hear an aircraft fly over. In fact, while I was out walking on Dartmoor today, I found myself in an area with no mobile service, so I was unable to find out what the unusually noisy aircraft was that flew overhead, although I'll assume it to be an elderly cargo plane, likely on the way to South America, as that tends to be the case with a lot of the larger stuff that comes down this way. Anyway, once I was back home, I was coincidentally reading a really great book about Air Canada Flight 143, the Gimli glider. That's been hugely interesting, but literally that is another story. Anyway, while I was reading, I heard a propeller aircraft fly over the house, and upon looking at Flight Radar 24, I was rather surprised to see it was an ATR 72 owned by none other than Virgin Australia. It had flown up from the south of France and went on to land at Exeter Airport, which is only a couple of minutes flying time from where I live. Well, this guy was either really lost, or perhaps I speculate that as Virgin were part of the original group of investors to buy Flybe, they were positioning this aircraft for the relaunch of Flybe. I'd love to find out if that's true, so if anyone has any insider information, I'd love to hear more. Perhaps more fascinating to me is the thought that repositioning this aircraft from Australia to the UK must have been quite an adventure for a comparatively small aircraft like the ATR. I'd love to find out what the route was and how long it took. I'm also curious to know if this is the only one, or whether there will be more that have made the journey, as I understand that the Flybe -8s got sold off, and in one instance a group of them went to Canada to be used as firefighting aircraft. So I guess it has been announced that they've got some slots at Heathrow, and I guess if they haven't got any aircraft, then they might need to get some in. Anyway, I posted a screenshot from Flight Radar 24 on my Instagram story, so perhaps if Matt can pop that up for those of you watching on the YouTubes. Well, that's enough rambling from me. Thanks again, guys, for all your hard work. You produce a really great show. It's hugely enjoyable, and your guests have been absolutely knockout lately. All the best. This is Nick Codling, wishing you all tailwinds and all the good stuff that they say over on the other show.
The other show, how rude. There aren't any other shows, are there?
There's no other aviation podcast,
no,
honestly.
Absolutely. APG or something. No, absolutely. Very good.
Big thanks to Nick Codling for sending that in. And yes, it does beg the question, what's going on with those aircraft? I'd imagine that there is some kind of movement going on of those to use for other purposes, perhaps for Flybe. Yeah. So yeah. And actually, Nick mentioned...
I've been caught out. Sorry, APG's in the chat room. By the way.
Oh dear. Oops.
Sorry.
But actually, Nick was talking about the Gimli glider, and I've got my piece of the Gimli glider here.
Oh wow!
You probably can't actually see that on the camera, but it's probably
767.
767. Yeah, I've got my piece of genuine skim from the Gimli glider 767 here, which I cherish. Indeed. It's on my in my office here. But yeah, thanks for sending that in, Nick. Very much appreciated, and nice to hear from you. Don't forget, if you want to send feedback into the show, we'll have all the relevant links at the end of this show to send that into. But Matt,
yes,
you have got a little bit of very special information for our listeners.
Indeed, yes. Now, regular listeners to the show, or should we say perhaps long-suffering listeners to the show, may remember a long time ago we used to have a regular guest on the show, a young lad by the name of Owen. And Owen, I'm delighted to say, is it's a privilege to call my best friend now after many years, and we miss him being involved in the show greatly because he was always very, very good value. But anyway, Owen, who many of you will remember, today he got married to the lovely Agnes, which is very exciting. So we all want to say congratulations to Owen and Agnes on their very, very special day. We are all absolutely devastated that we couldn't be there to celebrate with you, but because of some stupid pandemic that's going on. But there we go. So yes, from all of us, I think congratulations on your very, very special day. And I'm sure, I dare say they won't see this this for a long time, because hopefully they're eating lots of very nice food and drinking lots of beer. So congratulations to Owen and Agnes.
Yeah, lots of love in the chat room for the guys, Matt. Lots of congratulations from all our listeners. So, yeah, all the best, Owen. Hope you have a fantastic evening of fun this evening. So, yeah, take care. And hopefully we might get some feedback from him, at some point to say how he got on.
Yes, I think you're a bit hopeful there, aren't you?
I know. Anyway, we're going to say a big hello and welcome to everyone who's joined us on the YouTube stream this evening. All the usual family members in there, including some who were in there an hour before we started. So that is dedication for you.
Including producer John, I should say, as well. There from the start.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And we'll say hello to Golden Dragon. Haven't seen you in the chat room, so welcome to you, Golden Dragon. Lee Davies is in there. Richard Adams. Hello to you, Richard Adams. We have got Captain Cruz. We've got Auntie Liz over in Canada. Hello to you, Auntie Liz. We've got Stephen Ivory over in the US. Hello to you, Stephen. Alan White's in there. Tony S. Mazus Karim. Hello to you as well. Masha is there. Tony S. David Corsten. Hello, David, over in Spain. Nice to see you in the chat room. Our main man, Uncle Micah, over in the US as well. He's tuned in tonight. Nice to see you, Micah. Laura Davis is also there. Hello to you, Laura, over in the US as well. And who have we got? Myla. Hello to Myla. Hope you're well, Myla. Hope you're having fun this evening. And just make sure I don't miss anyone. APG crew, obviously. The APG crew is in there.
The trouble is, you're never quite sure which one, are you?
And also this week, nice to see Dave Abbey in as well. And
wow.
Dave actually commented earlier that it's nice that we run to quite a consistent schedule on this show at our time.
That's because Nev wouldn't have it any other way, would you, Nev? Let's be honest.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very strict.
So moving on then to our guest on the show tonight. I know lots of people have been very much looking forward to tonight's guest. And tonight's guest on the show is a senior inspector of air accidents at the Air Accident Investigation Branch here in the UK. He is an experienced chartered aircraft engineer, manager, and air safety practitioner with expertise in rotary and fixed-wing land and maritime aviation. He's also had a very busy career indeed within the Royal Navy, which included being the Deputy Air Engineer Officer for 899 Squadron, overseeing the famous Sea Harrier and Harrier jump jets. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome onto the show Bob Vickery.
Good evening, everybody. Lovely to be here.
Welcome, Bob. Welcome on to the organised chaos that is on the show. So, Bob, thanks for taking time out of your Friday to join us. And you're obviously you work within the Aaa Ib, which we'll be talking about later on. But I suppose we need to start off, Bob, asking really kind of where aviation started for you.
Well, I've always been interested in engineering and anything that moved, whether it be planes, ships, trains, cars, whatever. And my background, my family, a lot of my family members were in the Navy. That or teachers was the choice, really. And so I joined the Navy back in '82 and was selected for air engineering. I originally wanted to be a marine engineer, but I was given the choice. And so I ended up being an air engineer. And I joined at the time when they had apprenticeships. I did an apprenticeship. And my sort of engineering career developed from there, really. And I started with Sea Harriers, and I did a spell with Canberras, actually, at the RAF Whitton, when the Navy and the Air Force had a joint squadron, 360 squadron. Did a spell there. And then went back into Sea Harriers, served on illustrious Ark Royal, things like that. And gradually went up through the ranks and what have you, and was commissioned and did a bit of shipbuilding and all sorts of things. And eventually I joined the Navy's own investigation body, which was the Royal Navy Flight Safety and Accident Investigation Centre, which was at Yeovilton. And then post the Haddon Cave report, if you call a Nimrod in terrible situation in Afghanistan in 2006, I think, it was suggested that the military formed a tri-service investigation branch. called the Military Air Acts Investigation Branch, which then evolved into the Defence Acts Investigation Branch. And my commission came to an end as that sort of came to fruition. And I had a little break and 6 months or so doing what I wanted to do. And I knew that the Aaaib would be looking for people. So I put my hat in the ring and here I am.
Nev.
Yeah, it's a fascinating start, Bob. So how did you get into the Aaaib itself?
Well, first of all, I'm a chartered engineer, and what they're looking for, what I had, and all my colleagues have actually, is a broad engineering background. So we're experts in nothing in particular, apart from, we like to think, investigating accidents. But you need to be very open-minded, and you know, I went through quite a stiff selection process. They have to take great care with who they select, because there are aspects of the job which can be quite tough and traumatic. And gradually you sort of build your experience once you join the branch. And every day you're learning something new. But to answer your question, yeah, so I was selected from a group of applicants, and it was whittled down to me, and that was that. Here I am.
So you've had obviously various kind of positions within the Royal Navy, Bob. What did you enjoy the most whilst you're in the Navy?
Oh, the variety and the friendship, camaraderie, and the fact that the Navy was then and still is full of opportunity. They never say no. If somebody has an aptitude for something, is willing and what have you, they are always very keen on developing people and bringing them to their, it's in their advantage, bringing them to their full, you know, fruition of their skills and what have you. And it's the same with the other services as well. Both the Air Force and the Army, of course, are the same. They're looking for people who they can develop and who want to develop, and the world's your oyster. But I enjoyed it immensely. You know, I enjoyed looking after the big boys' toys, if you like. You know, ships and Sea Harriers and all of that sort of thing. I mean, there is a serious business behind it, but you know, it's a mindset and what have you. But no, I don't think I ever had a dull day or a boring day in the Navy.
Nev.
Yeah, it sounds like you had a very wide variety of work, actually, Bob. But just bringing you back to the Aaaib now, what's the training like to become an inspector?
Okay, so first of all, you start with a broad experience, but actually everybody goes to Cranfield University to do the Safety and Acts Investigation course, which starts off, it's a 6-week course and it's part of an MSc. And it starts with the fundamentals, which is effectively multimodal. So, you know, if you're investigating an aircraft accident, an accident at sea, a maritime accident, or a rail accident, or whatever, then the principles are the same. But then the second part of the course becomes much more specialist in your field. So in my case, it's aviation. And that tends to look much more closely at the techniques and the processes that you might use doing an investigation, and the protocols, and the legal framework, and how the state investigative body operates and works. And that's done at Cranfield, but you never stop learning. Every day, you know, in this job, there is something new to learn or understand. But the start is Cranfield.
So for someone who's kind of leaving school and who might want to sort of try and get a job within the Aaaib, obviously the path is to go, as you said, to the college as such. But are there any kind of qualifications or grades or stuff that are required from school leavers?
You need to build an experience in aviation. Because you are required to understand and interact with people who are often hugely experienced. They may be at very high levels within a manufacturer or an operator. And so you need to be able to talk at that level. And the only way to do that is to build on experience. So the inspector, certainly the engineering and all of the inspectors in the branch, and there's 4 types in practice. So we have operations inspectors who are professional pilots. We have recorded data specialists who are able to deal with all of the black box flight data recorder stuff, electronics, avionics, that sort of thing. And we have a human factors inspector who is an expert in the psychological side of things. And you know, the engineers have a very broad range of experience. So we have aerodynamicists, we have people from the airlines, the big airlines, you know, managing large fleets of aircraft. We have people from manufacturing, people from engine manufacturers. So you need to build that experience. So if you're young and leaving school, then and you want to be an inspector of engineering, an inspector of accidents, you know, in the engineering field, then you know, start going into aircraft aeronautical engineering. And many companies have their own, especially the airlines have their own safety investigation teams. Rolls-Royce has a safety investigation team. So there's the start of the sort of investigative world. So once you've got that, just keep an eye. We advertise reasonably, not that often, but regularly enough to keep a throughput. Engineers and the inspectors tend to stay a long time. It's a sort of something that people are passionate about. Once they start, they really go on until they retire, but not always. And yeah, that's the way to do it. It's a broadness of experience.
Actually, Bob, you mentioned there about you've got sort of different, like Rolls-Royce, for example, have their own sort of investigative sort of branches as well. I was intrigued to know actually, like. Because there are quite certainly, as far as flying is concerned, there's some big differences between military and commercial. And I was interested. Tony S in the chat room has actually asked the question: how do civilian accident investigations differ from those in the military?
Well, by process and technique, there's very little difference. Having said that, the military do operate a service inquiry system where if there's an accident, they will convene a service inquiry. And that service inquiry is supported, mentored, and guided by trained investigators as part of the Defence Accident Investigation branch. And the trained investigators will start the investigation and triage it, if you like. And then selected inquiry panel members will then take or sort of become part and take over the investigation and produce a report, make the recommendations accordingly. In the civil world, the principle is very similar, except there is no service inquiry. It's or no other body that inquires. The state investigative body, so that's the Air Accident Investigation branch, will convene an investigation when a notifiable accident has occurred and form a team within the branch and deploy as required and then carry out a full and thorough investigation as required. But the processes, so the engineering, there's not a lot of difference really. Okay, we're dealing with fast jets sometimes in the military, but of course there are fast jets and large jets in the commercial civil aviation world, as well as light GA aircraft and of course a variety of ultralights, microlights, helicopters and so on. So the principles of investigation are the same. It's just the subtlety of how it's done as far as how the team is formed is different.
We've got a couple of other questions that I'll take from the chat room, if that's okay, guys, while we're there, and we'll go back to some of our other questions in a moment. But Captain Cruz is asking, how is the jurisdiction when it comes to aircraft accidents, and who decides which parties and entities investigate what?
Yeah, that's a great question, because, of course, that's something we deal with every day.
I bet.
So if, for example, there is an accident to a G-registered aircraft in the UK, then the Air Accident Investigation branch has primacy and will lead the investigation. So at state of occurrence is the UK, state of registration is the UK, and so on. If that happens to be an aircraft which is manufactured, say, in the United States, then we invite, under international protocols and law, what's called an accredited representative. And that is somebody who is entitled to become part and join in with the investigation.
Okay.
And they will bring with them, so it's manufactured in the States, so they will bring with them what are called experts under international protocols, so they will be the manufacturer's representatives. So similarly, if we have an aircraft perhaps of on the G-Reg which has an accident in, I don't know, France or somewhere like that, then the Bureau Enquête, our French brethren will convene an investigation, and we will be the accredited representatives. And that's usually one or two, usually one accredited representative, and he will bring with him or she will bring with her a group of, or the manufacturer, who are then known as the experts, and the investigation is convened, and it's a big team effort. But the report and the recommendations are made by the state which is investigating the accident. But of course, we are part of that investigation, will comment and assist in constructing that report and those recommendations, and so on. And similarly, if we have an N-registered aircraft have an accident in the UK, then the NTSB would become the accredited representatives to us. So that's how it works. And all this is set out in ICAO Annex 13. Now, this was set up in the Chicago Convention of 1944. ICAO was set up. And I always think to myself, they had a bit of a sense of humour because it is Annex 13, investigation of aircraft accidents. But all those protocols were set up, and they are effectively standards and recommended practices for the state investigative body. And all of those things are enshrined in the laws of various countries. So we have it enshrined in UK law that we have primacy. We will take charge of the wreckage. We will conduct the investigation. We will make the safety recommendations. We will protect our information. So, for example, cockpit voice recorders are protected. The data from them is the audio recordings are protected. We are the only ones who are allowed to listen and deal with them. The evidence is protected so that we can conduct an impartial investigation. So I hope that answers your question, but in a nutshell, that's really where we are. So there are protocols which are internationally applied. And it's a small world. I mean, when you do deploy to an accident site abroad, the chances are you will know or know of the people you're going to be part of that team with.
Wow.
Nev.
A question from David Corston, Bob. Do you think that cameras in the flight deck could be a good idea for accident investigations alongside the cockpit voice recorder and flight data recorders?
Yes, that's a very, very interesting question, and a very live question, actually, because as a result of the EC-135 accident in the centre of Glasgow, in the Clutha pub, one of the recommendations which we made was that, as well as cockpit voice recorder, flight data recorders, that there are video recorders also fitted within the cockpit. And that recommendation was taken up. So state aircraft operated by on behalf of the state have that now. And that's and certainly we were only a few months ago, we were looking at the sort of commercial fitment of those to many aircraft. So yes, they are very helpful. They're only there, and they will be protected under law in the same way as the cockpit voice recorder recordings are. But they are useful, and they're only for accident investigation. And this is the point. And of course, cockpits are workplaces. Pilots and crews spend a lot of time in them. So there are the lighter moments and the flippant moments. We're not interested in those. We're interested in what might have happened, or the human factor side of what might have happened. And sometimes seeing what people's hands or control movements are doing is vital to an investigation.
I can imagine.
Yeah, a question from Tony S in the chat room. He says, how serious does an incident have to be before the AAIB gets involved? In other words, what's the trigger for one of your investigations?
So if we work downwards, the highest level and the one that we will always deploy to is a fatal accident, both whether it's a GA accident, whether it's commercial air transport. Often we are notified of something happening, and the duty coordinator, so for 24/7, 365 days a year, there's a duty coordinator who has a team available to him to deploy or her to deploy at any time, will make the decision as to what we do. Often we ask for a correspondence, an aircraft accident report form. So we will send out to the pilot or the crew a form for them to fill in, and we'll look at it from there. But it's a judgment call, and it's very much based on a sort of risk assessment. So what's happened? What could the consequences have been? What went right? What went wrong? Is there something to learn? Do we need to look at this more closely? And actually, the catch-all is that the Chief Inspector of Accidents can initiate an investigation on anything he sees fit in aviation. So in big handfuls, fatal, commercial air transport, usually deployed to, not always. And then from there on, we make a judgment call.
Yeah. This is not meant to be a flippant question, Bob, but I have two highlights every month for me. One is my payday, and the second one is the monthly Aaaib report, which I always read. But in reading them over many years, I've noticed, certainly comparing them to the Irish ones and Australia, New Zealand, South Africa in particular, I noticed that the format are very, very similar across the different continents. Is this because the Aaaib actually train other boards as well?
No. There are variations on a theme, but actually all accident investigation reports are based and laid out based on the protocol set out within Annex 13. So, for example, Section 1 will always be the facts of the matter, the details of the aircraft, the history of the flight, facts. Section 2 is always the analysis. So it's the assembly of those facts and working out what those facts are telling us and understanding. And then Section 3 and Section 4, of course, are the conclusions and recommendations. So it's always set out like that. And that, again, was set out all those years ago in Annex 13. And it's worked. It's a good way of doing it. The slight variation on the theme often is that if we're doing what's called a bulletin report rather than a foreman or inspector's report, then we may not have all of the subsections that we sometimes have. For example, there may be a section that says test methods used, for example. We don't tend to always do that. And so the sort of aircraft accident report form, the correspondence ones, may have a history of flight, a synopsis, history of flight, and then go into a discussion or a analysis of what was taken apart or examined and what was found. So yes, the reports you see from Ireland, for example, yes, they do look very similar, and there's a reason for that.
It's just sort of a formula, essentially. It's
yes.
Just sort of agreed. Now, Micah actually is asking one of the questions. It's like, so obviously the Aaaib here in the UK. What for our US listeners? What is the sort of similar equivalent to yourselves?
So the equivalent is the National Transportation Safety Board in
right.
the US, or Transport Safety Board Canada.
Right.
So again, state investigative bodies, well-found, well-funded, well-trained. And again, we're very used to working with all of them. There are international forums, and we meet them all on a regular basis when we can, pandemics permitting, of course. But yes, so it's the NTSB is the US equivalent, who actually have a slightly wider remit than we do. We are not multimodal, although there is a rail branch and there is a marine accident investigation branch.
Oh, wow.
The NTSB National Transportation Safety Board look at railways, roads, pipelines, I think, as well, and maritime accidents as well. So they're multimodal, but of course have aviation specialists.
Okay, so two very quick questions, if I may. One from Dan Brennan is like, can you set an argument for me? How do you define an accident or an incident?
I can. The best way for me to settle that really is to ask you to actually look on the Annex 13, because of course there are subtle differences. Accident, when an aircraft is badly damaged, and there's a whole category of sets of damage where there is injury or sadly fatal, or the aircraft is missing and has not been located. An incident is lesser, so that's effectively bumps and scrapes or things that didn't go quite as planned, but people walked away from. But they are categorised. We could be here quite a while going through the whole list.
It's a whole show right there just on that one subject. Yes. Now, obviously, we're, as Nev says, obviously it's the highlight of one of the highlights of his month is sort of thumbing through the reports and stuff. But with the more serious incidences, presumably, obviously, that does bring another challenge. That I would see in the fact, obviously, you've got to report that information to an official body or indeed a day in court. I mean, what's that like for you guys to sort of take your findings, if you like, to, because these things are very serious.
Yes. So with fatal accidents under UK law, if there's a fatality within English or Scottish UK jurisdiction, then there will be an inquest. Now, in England, that there is an inquest. Wales, there's an inquest, and same in Northern Ireland. But in Scotland, there's a thing called a fatal accident inquiry. They're very similar, but there are subtleties in the law. But the inquests answer 4 questions: the who, the where, and the when, beyond doubt, and the how, or by what means. And it's the by what means that person met their death is where we are invited to give evidence. Our evidence is the report. So we speak to the report in the court, so in the inquest. However, of course, there are going to be questions about how we came to our conclusions, what we did. So, of course, we're there to answer and effectively fill out or fill in those details so the coroner, or in the case of Scotland, can fully understand and draw his verdict on the facts. Because, of course, coroners and juries, there are invariably juries where we're concerned because a state body has carried out an investigation, so there'll be a jury. The coroner has to be absolutely sure that he and his jury completely understand what has happened. And, of course, the chances are many of those people on the jury, and the coroner himself, won't have an aviation background. So we have to prepare ourselves to answer all those questions so that they understand fully what we're saying in our report.
Sort of break it down into plain English almost, I suppose.
Yes.
So
So half of the skill of an investigator is not just the kicking the tin, as we call it, on the accident site and taking things apart and examining things and all that sort of stuff. It's actually being able to put it into plain English such that people will be able to understand completely what we're saying. But also that those who are empowered to take action to correct or change things to make things better, act on the recommendations, absolutely understand what we're doing and what we're saying and what happened, so it can be fixed. You have to be quite good at explaining complex techniques, complex systems, or flying characteristics to people who may never have come across them before.
And the other thing that is sort of looking at it from, because everybody knows, my background, I don't know hardly anything about aviation, so I would be your worst nightmare in that court scenario, trying to explain to me what it was. But one of the things that occurs to me actually is when you're turning up to these sometimes awful incidents or accidents, I mean, it must be very difficult to sort of take the human element out of it. You know, your immediate sort of compassion and things like that. It must be very difficult to sort of switch that off and look at the facts almost.
Yeah. Well, we do have training for that, but I did deploy to a fatal accident only this weekend, actually. And you prepare yourself mentally, but you're there to do a job. You're there to find out what happened, what went wrong. And it may be that the deceased is still there, and you do have to make a judgment examination of where that person is in the aircraft and what he might be holding, all that sort of stuff. You know, what page has he got open on the flight reference cards, perhaps, something like that. But you also have to show great care and compassion and respect the dignity of those concerned. And you have to be calm, and you have to think and be methodical. But of course, you also have to deal with the families.
Yeah.
And it may be that you will meet the family, and often we do, invariably we do. And you've got to remind yourself that these people are having the worst day of their life, probably, if not the worst weeks of their life. So you have to be very careful in how you conduct yourself, what you say and what you do. And you have to remain professional and detached, but mindful that being too detached could be seen as perhaps being a little aloof and not caring.
Or sort of cold almost, yeah.
Yes. So that's an important aspect. But, you know, you are there to do a job. You are there to understand, and you owe it to that person to try and find out what went wrong. It may also be, you always have to have in mind that you may get to the bottom of what's happened, and the truth of the matter could be unpalatable to families. Because it turns out that that person made a decision or took an action which resulted in the accident. So so you have to be very careful and mindful of that.
Wow. We've got some questions from Armando. I know he's not with us this week, but he's left us some instructions. But one of the first ones, Bob, that Armando's got here on the list is how important are records such as operations records, maintenance, training records, weather reports, etc., to the investigation process? Have you ever discovered records that have been altered for an investigation?
Firstly, yes. I always have a sort of not a mantra, but a sort of mindset, and that is that when you deploy to an accident, start an investigation, all bets are on. In other words, there is nothing that you're not interested in. And that includes records, historical records, certification, training records, operational records, weather reports, radar reports, air traffic reports, all of those things. Vitally important, because in amongst those records may be the little piece of information which leads you to understanding what caused the accident. So yeah, they're vital, and it's all part of the evidence, and we gather it, we go around and collect it. When there is an accident under UK law, that evidence is protected and must be impounded. So if, for example, an operator has an accident to an aircraft, then they must immediately, effectively secure the documents, secure the electronic data, because of course there's tons of electronic data which is kept about aircraft on the ground. The aircraft is squirting data at ground stations constantly, and all that has to be locked and secured effectively. So it's vitally important. It's all part of it until we know it's not. And so that's why we methodically go through everything. And yes, I have gone through records of aircraft that were for an accident, you know, say 2 or 3 years ago, and looking at aircraft data going back to the 1940s. Wow. So, you know, as I say, all bets are on. Not always. Mainly it's the sort of last 6 months is the interesting stuff. Alteration or anything which we find, I've not come across falsification of documents. I have been told falsehoods by individuals in the past, but you can usually have a sixth sense and pick up what people, whether they're telling the truth or not to you. But if we uncover the possibility that a crime might have been committed, so for example, if there is a piece of information which is fraudulent, completely fraudulent, then we have to inform the police or the authorities accordingly.
And just out of interest on that, Bob, actually, Tony has said in the chat room there, saying if an accident involves a criminal or negligence, do you guys have priority in terms of evidence over the police?
No. Well, that's an excellent question, and the best example of that is, of course, the most famous and saddest example, of course, is Lockerbie. So there was a crime committed, without a doubt. But until you know it's a crime, it's an accident. And so my predecessors, of which there's one still in the branch actually, who was involved in the Lockerbie investigation, had to work methodically through that. And gradually it came to light, and then more firm evidence came to light that it was a crime. So the issue that we wrestle with, and we have put things in place for now, is whether there's a terrorist act, for example, which is another sort of thing we have to think about, where the police will open an investigation in parallel to us. But we have primacy over the evidence at an accident site. And of course, if we interview somebody, we cannot give that interview or that name of that person to the authorities, the police. They have to re-interview and locate that person themselves. The reason for that, so the reason for that, again, is enshrined in international law and in UK law, and that is that we do not apportion blame or liability, and that we work anonymously. In other words, we do not name names, and we do not give information like that to other bodies. The reason being that if we did, nobody would ever talk to us.
True.
We do safety investigations, and that's the important thing. We're not there to do a criminal investigation. If after our investigation is complete, somebody decides that they want to take litigation, then that's up to them. And they will have to gather their own evidence and accordingly. We get into some difficulties with courts asking us to disclose things which are protected, but that only a high court can do that. And that has happened on a couple of occasions recently. And one particular example, which I won't give, but failed to get the High Court behind it. Another one didn't, so we had to give up some of the evidence.
My goodness me! So yours is your role almost is your focus is more about sort of almost preventative, I suppose. You're looking at what happened to try and make sure that doesn't happen again, essentially, rather than gathering evidence for in terms of prosecution and things like that.
Yes, absolutely. None of our interviews are conducted under PACE, for example, Police and Criminal Evidence Act, and we are there solely to understand what happened, both what went wrong and what went right in many cases. So don't forget, some accidents could be a lot worse had not safety devices or safety procedures or protocols switched in and prevented it becoming worse than it already was, and then reporting accordingly, because it's one of those things that if you constantly chip away at the things that go wrong in aviation, and make recommendations to fix things, gradually aviation becomes safer and safer and safer to the standard that it is today. And we have really all our predecessors to thank for the work they did in the past, with some of the famous accidents that have occurred, which has altered aviation and made it such a safe thing to do.
Actually, we've got another question, I should say, from Armando, Bob. And it's going back to the technology and stuff inside the cockpit of these aircraft. But there's been, he says, some tremendous advances in general aviation and light aircraft technology, sometimes rivaling that of business jets.
Yes.
How do you extract and analyze information from systems such as engine monitors, GPS, iPads, and flight planning software, and even cameras that more and more people are using on flights these days?
Yeah, so for example, the GoPro and of course, I suppose other action cameras are available, but yes, so there is a lot of electronic data, and you just imagine the amount of data held within a Garmin 1000 cockpit, for example. Some of it is kept on cards and what have you. SD cards or PCMIA cards are remarkably robust, actually, and do survive accidents. But much of the data in some of the avionics systems we've got, particularly data bus systems, are held, or the immediate data is held within what we call non-volatile memories. And that's where my colleagues in the recorded data group really come into their own. And they can be presented with a printed circuit or an integrated circuit, which is by all means sort of virtually destroyed and might even be burned. And they do have practical techniques and the skills to often remount those things, repower them up and extract the data, and then analyze the data and explain how or what happened. So there's a lot more data in even simple GA aircraft than there ever was. And we do have ways and means of getting at it and getting to it. iPads or tablets, of course, used more and more with some of the navigation apps, which are brilliant. Again, we have methods and techniques where we can get into those. Sometimes we need commercial help with companies who can effectively get past the software walls and what have you. But yeah, so we gather all of that and then see what we can get from it.
Can I ask you, Bob, how easy or difficult is it to work with partner agencies such as ATC, aircraft component manufacturers, or private operators? Can you bring these people in as subject matter experts?
Yes. So, for example, and we do use forensic laboratories and metallurgists or fuel test places. We also use the expertise of some of the universities. And the military, of course. So back to the Navy. The Navy itself has its own metallurgy laboratories and what have you, which are down in Portsmouth Dockyard. And so we ask for their assistance, and they become part of the investigation. They have confidentiality clauses, of course, which we stitch into things. But we work very closely with all agencies required. So, be it NATS, CAA, of course. We're not part of the CAA. We're independent of the CAA. But obviously, they're a vast repository of data for certification of an aircraft, pilot records, medical records, all those sort of things. And of course, the manufacturers. We work very closely with their own investigators, and if they haven't got investigators, with their engineers or test pilots or whatever. So and we like to think we have a lot of friends in the industry, and they understand, and it is in their interest often to work closely with us, because we can get to and improve it. If we improve things, they can improve their product or whatever. It's a team thing.
And the detail you go into is enormous. And I've seen a number of reports, and this is just from entirely me speaking from an amateur point of view, where it's been what I would consider a bit of a minor incident, and you've churned out a 64-page report on it. And it's taken months and months and months to get to the truth. So it's a massively detailed exercise, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And we like to think that we are as thorough as needed and as accurate as needed. There is no room for guesswork or speculation in aviation safety. So we try to be accurate. We double check, and check again. We do make mistakes. We're not too proud to admit that sometimes we make errors or mistakes, and we will publish the correction if required. There may be major differences of opinion from a third party, but we base our investigations on evidence. And if by any chance a piece of evidence comes to light which may change the outcome, then under the regulations, the chief inspector can reopen investigation. But that's very, very rare. But yeah, we do. And a lot of the work we do is you don't see in the report. We have to do it through due diligence, and so that we have explored every avenue. And certainly there's a lot of work goes on behind the scenes of ones where we really can't, some accidents we really cannot explain beyond doubt what happened.
I mean, that must be really frustrating for you, though, I guess, because as you say, you want to get to the bottom of everything, don't you?
Yes, you do, and that's what you're working towards. The sort of and forgive the sort of analogy, but the smoking gun. Find a smoking gun, then great. And sometimes you're working away, you're looking at the evidence, and suddenly it dawns on you. Everything fits together. You go, aha, that's what happened. And then you suddenly realise that it all fits together. But what you don't do is try and fit the evidence to a theory. You've got to let the evidence drive the theory and drive the outcome.
Have you ever been involved? I appreciate you can't be specific, obviously, but have you been involved in an investigation where the conclusions have surprised you in the end? It sort of didn't go down the route that you were expecting.
Oh yes, yeah. And I can't give you an example off the top of my head, but yes, there have been occasions where we think, where did that come from?
Right.
And there was an inspector, a colleague of mine who recently retired, who'd been at the branch since 1972, actually. He always had a sort of mantra which said, and it'll be something we were least expecting. And that's through nearly 50 years of experience. But yeah, that there are sort of left field things, if you like, suddenly come to light. Not often, but there are occasionally, and you think, that really is a surprise.
Yeah, I bet.
Actually, for a question from myself, inquisitive question, I've always wondered. I'm a big fan of the Air Crash Investigation series that they show on TV, which you guys have featured in many times, as well as the NTSB.
Yes.
You kind of see the program, and you hear about the Go team that the NTSB have, and you see how they grab a bag and they run out of a room, and they're on on site. Yeah. But kind of sort of sum up kind of the beginnings for you as an investigator. Yes. Do you get a phone call? There's been a crash. Yeah. How does a day start for you?
So let me just put a couple of myths to bed. That is, we don't go running around, grabbing bags and what have you. So the Air Accident Investigation Branch has 2 teams available throughout the year, 24/7, 365. And the teams will be an engineer and ops inspector, so a professional pilot, recorded data group, and the human factors inspector, who is ready to assist at any stage. If a notification is phoned in or is received by whatever means, and we keep an eye on the media, of course, one of the principal inspectors, so it's a very experienced investigator, who is the duty coordinator, will decide what we do. And as happened to me on Sunday, I will be phoned, and we then gather our equipment. I leave from home, go to the branch, collect my kit, which is ready to go at any time. So there is a go kit. So I do have a little suitcase packed. I have my tools and equipment packed. I have foul weather gear and all the things you'd need. Throw them in the back of a vehicle, and off you go. So you then go to where you're told, to the site. The police are usually controlling the site. The site is now under my jurisdiction, but is still protected by the police. And we start the investigation. Very little running about. It's less speed, more haste. It's a lot of information to gather. There's a lot of stuff to think about. What are the risks? What am I dealing with? How big is the aircraft? What sort of things might be a danger to the public on the aircraft? So let's probably go back to something like is there a ballistic parachute recovery system fitted? Is it unstable? Where's the fuel? What are the stored energy devices? All that sort of stuff. We think carefully and just make sort of get an idea of what we're going to be faced with before we go to the site. The ones that we will start to move a bit more quicker for would be, for example, if we had main runway blocked at Heathrow or something like that, where actually there is now a big risk starting to build because of aircraft having to divert, hold, etc. So we will endeavour to get there as quickly and as safely as possible.
It's just so fascinating. It really is. Actually, Mash is suggesting that, you know, once retirement beckons, that I think some memoirs are very much needed.
Actually, Bob, did you work? I mean, I suppose I asked the question. Did you work at all on the BA-38 at London Heathrow at all?
Just remind, I did that. The fact
that was the 777. Yeah.
No, I didn't. My colleagues did. So actually, the person who led that investigation is now the Deputy Chief Inspector. So Mike, as we call it. Yes, that was a big team.
Yeah.
So they will have, and what they did in that case with an aircraft of that size and an accident of that magnitude, and fortunately nobody lost their lives. They're fantastic. Its safety systems did just about what they were designed to do. But they separated the team, if I recall and believe, into so there was a team looking at landing gear, team looking at engines, team looking at evacuation, all that sort of stuff. And of course, that's something as big as that requires a lot of other agencies. So somebody to lift and shift the wreckage, police, air traffic, all of the things that the airport had to do to A, keep the other aircraft safe, and B, start a full investigation.
I mean, that again must present its own challenges, because I mean, obviously with an incident of that nature, obviously, and it's come down just short of the threshold of the runway. I mean, Heathrow is well known for being the most busiest airport,
yeah.
You know, certainly on these shores, isn't it? I mean, there must be pressure from
yes.
the other people involved, if you like, at the airport to sort of hurry you up. I mean, that must
yes.
present its own challenges.
It does, and I'll give you an example of that. I deployed 3-4 years ago to Bristol, where Embraer 145, I think it was, if I recall, had effectively left the runway. It was landed with its parking brake on. Long story, but nevertheless, it landed and came to a stop in the safety area, and of course that closed the airport. So we arrived. This is 2 days before Christmas.
Oh my goodness!
So we arrived, and of course it's now ramping up to be one of the busiest weekends in normal times that you'd probably ever get every year, I suppose. And I was faced with an airfield staff who were under immense pressure from the operators, the public, to find out what's going on, to get their airfield back, and so on. But the regulations are there, and until I'm happy with that we've gathered all the evidence, I cannot hand it back, all the aircraft back to anybody until we've done that. But that does mean that rather than arriving and taking hours and hours, we can prioritise what we can do. And one of the things was to inspect the runway pretty quickly and get that back to them so they can start repairing the runway surface for use. There was a bit of damage. And then making sure that we could give them a sort of step-by-step return to operation. And of course, the stress levels in the poor airfield manager that day were huge. So this poor chap was sort of getting more and more worried as as time went on, but we did it as quickly and as safely and as accurate as we could before being able to hand it back to them. But yeah, the pressures are huge.
Yeah, I bet.
And the commercial pressures. But of course, if you've got aircraft that are airborne, and Heathrow's a great example, you've got aircraft coming back across the Atlantic, their options for diversion become less and less as long as time goes on.
True.
And so you've got to really be mindful of that. So hence, we would not just send a small team, it's a very big team to get as much done as quickly as possible.
Gather as much data,
Yeah.
No, there's we'll just fill another question quickly from Armando. I know Nev's got some more for you as well from the chat room. One of the other questions Armando asks, and it's a question actually I think we've asked ourselves in the on the show before. Why do investigations take so long relatively? Sometimes it will be years after the fact that a report is published.
Well, years is an extremis. The longest that I have engaged in was 2 years, and the reason for that was we really did not know what had caused, and still really don't know why a certain chain of events occurred with a particular aircraft, and so we keep going, revisiting and re-looking at everything in case we've missed something. We do have sort of aim points. We do like to sort of aim to get a report out within 6 months, 6 to 9 months if possible. The deputy chief and the chief inspector try and keep us to that, but of course they're mindful that we've got to be accurate, and if we rush we could miss something. But yeah, it can be months, but actually some of that time is null time, if you like, and that is where we send a report out for consultation under one of our regulations, regulation 16.1. We always call it 16. We're at 16.1, and what that does is we send a draft report in confidence to organisations or individuals whose reputations may be affected by what we're saying. Now, under UK law, they have 28 days. Under EU law, so that's what all our overseas brethren will do, they have 60 days to comment. So that adds a month or 2 months straight away. However, and this is important, and this is obviously people, you know, I can hear people think, well, hold on a minute, what if there's something urgent we need to fix or recommend against? We have a method whereby we can issue what's called a special bulletin, and that can be issued at any time during an investigation where we need to urgently draw something to somebody's attention to make a recommendation or to enact a recommendation. With a high profile major accident, that doesn't have to be a big aircraft, it will be a small aircraft, and let's draw your minds back to the Glasgow helicopter. We often issue a special bulletin within a week or so that we can tell the public where we are with it, where we're going with it, and what the progress and what the process will be. And those documents are read very carefully by industry or the industry and operators, because we will put in there if there's something they need to think about or look at. But we always reserve the right to completely go off on a tangent if evidence directs us that way.
Nev, you've got some
I was just thinking that, you know, your toolkit has gone from probably, you know, a pencil and a clipboard and a tape measure to, you know, very high resolution photography and also drones possibly. And I was just wondering whether, in fact, it was Alex in the chat room asked, are you making use of drones
Yes.
to photograph accident sites?
Yes. So just at the start of your question, you mentioned pencil and tape measure and what have you. Yes, there are pencils and tape measures. A big Stanley tape measure in my Go kit, as well as adjustables and all sorts of things. But yes, we do. We have a group of people. The engineering support staff are qualified drone pilots, and we have a selection of drones at our disposal, which we use. Mindful of staying within regulations. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but we we will overfly and photograph a site, and then we link that with various software packages, and sometimes we'll build a three-dimensional picture or a fly-through, if you like, of the site. We may refly the route or the trajectory of the aircraft. I did an investigation some years ago where reflying the trajectory of the aircraft showed me how the power lines which this aircraft hit became completely invisible when viewed from the air against the striations in the field made by the harrow the farmer had used.
Oh, wow.
The wires totally disappeared. You could only see that if you've done it from the air, and the drone was brilliant for doing that. So we use we have a selection of drones and qualified pilots. I will confess, a little while back, myself and my engineering support colleague did have a little bit of an accident with our drone and a tree, which was duly reported.
Did you feature in your own report then?
It was just we do report on drones. It was just before we got the legislation in to suggest that we do have to. But yeah, it's a little bit embarrassing. And rather costly to a very expensive camera lens.
I bet.
And a bit of pride dented.
Yeah.
But,
oh, that's the worst.
So, yes. Yeah. So we do use drones, yes.
Another question I've got for you, Bob. Obviously, many people who watch the show, including me, Matt and Nev and Armando as well, are all very good lovers of apps like Flight Radar 24, Flight Tracker, all the various ADS-B exchange on your desktop browser. We all look at these daily, wonder what's up in the sky and stuff. Is that a tool that the Aaa Ib can use in an investigation?
Yes, and often do.
Huh?
But we will go into the operator or the owner of that system and ask for the data that's in the cloud, or the data that they've recorded, and the background data, a lot of things. They are very helpful. So certainly the tracking apps are useful. They're very accurate, actually, in many ways. Sometimes not so, but often are. And of course, the navigation apps are also very useful. And if a pilot's been using one of those and is no longer able to speak to us, we can often see whether he's looked at the weather, whether he looked at the NOTAMs, whether he's taken heed of the warnings, whether his route and his altitude that he selected for that route took him into danger. And of course, those systems often scream quite loudly if you're about to plan yourself into an infringement, for example.
Sky Demon does that, yeah.
Yes, so we do, yeah, absolutely. As I said, I mean, it all bets are on, so everything is interesting until it's not.
Nev, you've got another one from Armando, haven't you?
Yes, Armando says aircraft don't seem to crash on an airfield on a sunny day. What are some of the more challenging scenarios that you face, such as terrain or weather, for example?
Yes, first of all, we do actually engage in quite a bit of rough terrain training. We go to Wales for that with an organisation up in Wales, fantastic place, but teaches us to not become casualties when we're out in the middle of nowhere. And you don't have to be in the middle of nowhere to be a casualty. Hypothermia and heat, often in the summer it is hot sunny days, and if you spend 12 hours or so, perhaps it can be in a field in Norfolk and high summer, and you don't take proper precautions, you're going to get pretty sunburnt and pretty dehydrated before long. So we have specialist training, but we have had to engage in investigations on mountainsides. And one of my colleagues ended up having to abseil down a cliff up on the Yorkshire coast some years ago with a helicopter. So, yeah, we train for those. We train for the adverse circumstances. But again, we're not too proud to ask for help. So for example, if there was an accident on a Welsh mountainside, then we would engage the local mountain rescue team to assist us. or the Air Force Mountain Rescue Team to assist in getting to the site safely and so on. But we've got a lot of equipment, a lot of kit. We take precautions and risk assess everything we do.
So we've got another one. I've got another one here. Quick, we may as well get this next one done from Armando, otherwise he'll get upset.
He'll be complaining. Yes.
Yeah. Armando's asking, how easy or difficult is it to work with partner agencies such as air traffic control (ATC), aircraft component manufacturers, or private operators?
It's in my experience, it's usually quite easy, and they're very helpful and want to find out what is wrong. You do occasionally come across people who are not necessarily as cooperative as you'd like. But one of the things that this job does exercise is your diplomatic skills. Those simple body language things which put people at ease, or sort of suggest to people that you're actually on their side and not a threat. And we are very, very careful. A lot of nervousness with modern or new technologies is, of course, intellectual property. So we're very careful to protect intellectual property, and only in circumstances where it's vital to reveal that will we do so for the aviation safety side of it. But in my experience, I've never really had anybody who's sort of put their hand up and say, "Go away, I'm not talking to you." So again, we're very careful to work at that. There are occasions where we have to sort of drill a little bit further than perhaps we normally have to get down to the nitty gritty of what we're asking. But most of the time, people are pretty cooperative.
Well, that is good to hear. Laura has got a question here in the chat room saying, are there any overall trends that you're identifying in recent years as far as causes of accidents, or any increases in the certain types of causes for accidents?
Yes, yeah. So I'm one of my other hats at the Aaaib is that I'm the editor of the annual safety review. The annual safety review publishes all our statistics. Again, it's available online. We're just working on 2020s. It always takes a while to pull together, so we get all of the facts we need to show to the public together. So, for example, in GA Aviation, by far the biggest cause of accidents, both fatal and non-fatal, is what we call LOCI, loss of control in flight. So that will be something as simple as stalling or spinning or something like that, or just making incorrect control input right at the wrong point. Loss of control in flight is the biggest, and seems to be the one which we just cannot push further down the scale. In commercial air transport, it's not quite as simple. That's a loss of control in flight is very, very rare. But there are occasions where, for example, if a crew haven't got on the glide path correctly or something like that, where we find, it's a sort of unstable approaches is probably the biggest one at the moment, perhaps. But so there are trends, and we do try and monitor them.
Absolutely. Well, I suppose that's for your own benefit, I suppose, as well, isn't it?
Yes.
You're looking for patterns and things like that.
Yeah.
So we're going to start to wrap up with you, Bob. But there's always one question that we ask our guests on the show. And actually, because you're a PPL license holder as well, this might be a good one for you as well. But Nev, what's that all-important question that we like to ask our guests before we wrap up?
Yes, it is the question. And given the chance to fly any aircraft at all, Bob, whether it's GA, commercial, military, it could be retired, it could be a current aircraft, what would that aircraft be?
No doubt, easy, Sea Fury.
Oh, fantastic.
Oh, okay, well done.
Okay.
We've not had that before.
Absolutely, no doubt.
So, what is it about the Sea Fury that gets you all excited?
Well, it's one of the fastest and best piston engine aircraft ever built, probably, in my opinion. There are other views, I'm sure. It's just phenomenal. And don't forget, Sea Fury, I think, is the only piston engine aircraft on record that actually got the better of a jet.
Oh wow.
Uh,
Okay.
Wow.
1951, Lieutenant Hoagie Carmichael and the MiG-15 in the Korean War.
Fantastic.
There you
I
go.
love it.
Good nice answer.
Yeah, and a great Jonathan Warner, who is a big military fan, is agreeing with you massively there, saying
Yes.
Sea Fury is beautiful. Yeah.
Jonathan Warner is very kindly donated the pictures that me and Matt have behind us for tonight's show. So thanks for them, Jonathan. But we're going to say a massive thanks to you, Bob, for coming on the show. I'm hopefully you're gonna stick with us for a little while. We've got to with
My
the commercial news. But it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm so pleased we got managed to get you on the show, and it's been good, isn't it, Nev?
Superb. And lots of great questions from the chat room, and we really appreciate your time this evening, Bob. Thanks ever so much.
Very, very, absolutely. As I say, my pleasure.
So on behalf of all the team, Bob, cheers. Thank you very much, and we are going to be back right after this.
Hello and welcome to another Plain Truth. And this week we're going to be talking about Squawks. Joining me as always is the legend that is Captain Al. Hi, Captain Al.
Hello and a very good evening.
A very good evening to you too. Now, this is a slightly odd one because I don't know a great deal about aviation, as people know, but I am familiar with the word squawk, and I seem to recall from various things that I've been reading online, etc. There's this 7700, and really I wanted to know what on earth they're all about. And I mean, I presume there's a list of these codes, for example. I mean, what are the codes for, and why are they used as opposed to just saying Mayday or something like that?
Okay, so let's have a look at what squawks are. So they are codes that are put into a transponder. So what is a transponder? Well, it's an electronic box that allows the aircraft to identify itself to a radar ground station. So if we go back a little bit to the invention of radar, and most people who aren't aviation related will have a mental picture of what's best described as an upturned dustbin lid with a little sweepy line that goes round and round and little blips, which is pretty accurate, really, or certainly was up until a few years ago. So that sort of old style radar with just little blips is great. But how do we know which blip is which? So prior to the invention of transponders, what the radar controller would do would be to get an aircraft to turn, say, left 40 degrees, and they would see which blip moved to the left by 40 degrees, and that would allow them to identify that blip, and they would make a mental note then as to which blip was which aircraft. As you can start to see, controllers of that era had to have a pretty good short-term memory because they were memorizing which blip as it moved across the screen.
Wow.
Not easy to do.
No, I bet.
And obviously quite a few blips on your screen. So as more and more aircraft were flying around, the fallibilities of this system were becoming to be quite well known. So the military had for a little while something called IFF. Not something I know an awful lot about, but IFF stands for interrogate, friend or foe. So if you imagine a box in your aeroplane and all of the people on your side have a similar box, and when the two boxes chat to each other, it goes, "I'm friendly, don't shoot me," then you can identify your team from the other team. Because if the other team don't have a box that sends back the same message, then you can assume them to be a foe. That's a very, very simple way of looking at it. But yeah, interrogate friend or foe. So let's go back to the civilian world. So civilian aircraft have a little box of electronics called a transponder. And what happens is that on the front of that box are some buttons or dials, and you can select a number between 0 and 7. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. And you can do that for 4 independent digits. So you could have 0, 0, 0, 0, or anything up to 7, 7, 7, 7. Okay. So it gives you quite a few combinations. Off the top of my head, and I'm not a mathematician, I think that's 4096, but Please don't quote me on that. That's just a number that it may well come from a Chinese takeaway that I'm familiar with, that number. But if there are any mathematicians, they might be able to prove or disprove my 4,096. Anyway, it gives you a number of combinations. So what happens is that when the aircraft is interrogated by the ground radar now, apart from sending its return back by virtue of being metal, it sends back the code that is on the transponder. So if air traffic control over the voice radio say Monarch 123, Squawk 1230, the pilots would select on their transponder box 1230, and that code will then be sent back to the ground station. The boxes on the ground will then associate that code with that blip, and therefore the controller is no longer looking at just a blip. He has a blip and the code that has been sent by the aircraft, in this particular case 1230. So now he's got to look at the blip, see the code, and remember which code he gave to which aircraft. Now, he's probably going to write that down, because most will. As technology progressed a little bit further, the computer on the ground was able to convert that number into the aircraft call sign. So now you have a blip and the aircraft call sign. A lot easier for the controller, obviously. So where the origins of Squawk come from, truthfully, I don't know. I can only assume that it's the equivalent of just shouting out your identification. So we've gone from sort of basic radar to radar with what was called mode alpha transponders, which is the ability to send that 4-digit code that is allocated to you. And each air traffic control unit may well change that code. So you might start off with 4545, and then the next controller might give you 6123 or something like that, and you will just change them. After a little bit of while, technology came along and allowed the aircraft to not only send its code, but to also send its altitude. So as you can imagine, previously the controllers had to have a pretty good 3D model in their head, because you're looking at a 2-dimensional display for a 3-dimensional world. So now their situational awareness is enhanced, because when the aircraft sends its altitude, the little box on the ground will interpret that. And then on the radar display will be the blip, the 4-digit code, which is now being converted into the call sign, and the aircraft's altitude. So that builds the picture up. We'll go forwards a few more steps, and then the transponder technology advanced a bit more, so that the altitude reporting was mode C, mode Charlie, and then we went on to mode Sierra, and now the transponder is able to send a lot more data. So, for example, it can send the call sign, it can send the speed that we're flying at, the speed that we've asked the aeroplane to fly at, our heading, and a whole host of other pieces of information. So in that little bit of sort of data stream, if you like, we can chuck a whole load of information in there. So basically, squawking is just the process of using the transponder on the aircraft to put in information that has been requested from ATC. Now, as you mentioned, there are some special codes. So these are internationally recognized or regionally recognized codes. So we'll start off with probably the most famous one, which is 7700, which is Mayday. So you said, why not just say it on the radio? Well, that's a fair point, but it assumes that your communication radios are working.
Fair.
And it also may be a case that you might have someone with a knife to your throat who may take offense at you transmitting what is going on. So maybe covertly you could put that code into the box, which takes us on to another code, which is 7500, which is hijack.
Oh, right.
So that could be put into the box, and air traffic controllers would therefore see that, and they will, by definition, not ask you details about what's going on, because they will realize the situation. There is a code in between those, for those of you who are keeping up with this, which is 7600, which is that my radios have failed. So like I say, it's a secondary form of communication. It's not speech communication, it's data. So 7600, yet the radios have failed. So those three are internationally recognized. There are one or two more. So 2000 is basically, I'm coming into your airspace and the previous controller has not allocated me a specific squawk. So it's just an identification saying, we are approaching you, we have not been assigned a code. In the United States... Sorry, go on.
Yeah, and presumably somebody would then contact them and give them a code if radio was working okay?
Yeah, absolutely. So examples of where 2000 is used is where aircraft are coming across, say, for example, the Atlantic, where there is no radar coverage. So as they leave radar coverage in the United States or Canada, they will stop using their previous code, their squawk, and put 2000 up. And as they're then approaching the western part of Ireland, the Irish air traffic controllers will see the aircraft. They'll be able to see them on radar with their 2000. Air traffic controllers can see you and can see that you are basically flying outside of controlled airspace in a VFR capacity, visual flight rules. The Americans use 1200 1200 for the same purpose. And dotted around the UK and the world will be sort of like localized squawks. So say, for example, if you're flying around XYZ city, but not actually speaking to us, just put this code up and listen to us. We're not in a contract of controller and pilot, but we know that you're listening to us. So if we need to speak to you, we can see that where you are and we'll give you a call. Those sort of things. They're called monitoring squawks. So yeah, it's just a box that adds on some facilities to us to identify ourselves with radar controllers.
So you're only sort of required to know like the emergency ones, essentially, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah. And the rest is essentially, the code is essentially given you. They're just trying to sort of summarize, really. So the code,
so
you're decided. You're told how to identify yourself on the system, essentially. Yeah.
So when you and I took off for our little flight in the little aeroplane, we had the squawk of 7000 7000. It's just a general one that's used in the UK, saying I'm flying around, and of course the radar controllers can see that, and they know that we're not actually talking to a particular air traffic controller. So it just gives visibility without actually specifically being under control of any particular radar controller.
I mean, as always, very expertly explained. Thanks, Captain Al.
It's a pleasure.
Well, welcome to our London studios. Welcome to the A320 Lounge webinar tech presentation, obviously for the 320 series.
Welcome to the A320 and 737 Lounge, bringing technical refresher courses directly to you. Using our cutting-edge broadcasting facilities, enjoy a fully interactive technical refresher course from the comfort of your own home. All of our webinars are live and you can ask your instructor a question at any point during the day. All of our instructors are highly experienced and can help you. No more expensive nights away from home, no new software required, just an internet connection. Courses are run at regular intervals, so check out A320 Lounge and 737lounge.com for more details.
Big thanks to you and Captain Al for that awesome work as always, Matt.
Yeah, the fascinating world of squawks this week.
It's one of those interesting things that I was always taught. One of the first things you're taught when you're setting up the transponder when you're flying GA aircraft, because some do have them in here at in the local area, and that is when you're dialing in the numbers, don't go past the relevant, the important numbers like the 7700s and the 7600s and the 7, because when you're following the aircraft on Flight Radar 24, you sometimes get aircraft that are squawking that, and 9 times out of 10, so I've been told, it's where the pilots have kind of dialed the numbers in and inadvertently gone over the 7700 something like that. So
never mind.
Okay. So we've got some commercial news to go through. So if everyone's ready,
here we go.
Let's go.
Oh, just a quick one, guys. My screen is frozen. That's a very unfortunate time. That's not very helpful, is it?
Okay.
You can have my one, Nev. I'll do yours then.
Yes, okay, there we go. Lovely. Well, that went well.
So this first one is on breakingtravelnews.com, the website. And British Airways, Nev's favourite, are to trial digital queuing system at Heathrow. So BA has revealed it will be trialling a new queuing technology from Queumatic. Wow. The carrier hopes the system will enable customers to virtually check in by pre-booking their time slot in advance of arriving at the airport. The technology that is optional for customers will be trialled by BA for 3 months on selected flights departing from Heathrow's Terminal 5. Customers will be sent an email before travelling, inviting them to book their personal check-in time. When it is time for the customer to check in, the Queumatic system will notify them that it's their turn, allowing them to simply go to the dedicated desk. Customers who have not booked a check-in slot through Queumatic can proceed as normal or have the option to join a virtual queue when they arrive at the airport by scanning a QR code. BA will be the first airline to trial Queumatic, which is currently used by BP service stations. That's interesting. And also the Tate Modern and the Post Office in the UK, among others, to help manage the flow of customers. Declan Pollard, BA's head of Heathrow customer experience, said, in this new COVID-19 era, we know that customers have been travelling less frequently than normal and in most cases not at all. We understand many people will feel unfamiliar with airport journeys, so we are committed to exploring how technology can simplify that experience for them. This means technology that our customers can plan their departure knowing that they have personalised check-in times. And he also said, we think this technology coupled with digital travel apps will help efficiently manage the flow of customers in the airport at any one time and give our customers reassurance. Nev, are we going to use this in September maybe?
Oh, I think we'll have to. I think there's an inevitability about this, isn't there? Because there's been so much talk about all of this business, and it feels to me as though it's not quite joined up properly yet. But we'll certainly find out on Monday of next week when the first passengers start to go out to Faro. In Portugal, and Gibraltar, not running to Tel Aviv at the moment for obvious reasons, but it'll be interesting to see how all that goes. Fascinating.
Matt, we're sticking with the queue.
Yeah, sticking with the themes. Yeah, absolutely. With the bbc.co.uk or .com if you're across the pond, shall we say. And the headline is Heathrow Airport could divert aircraft to ease crowding. So Heathrow Airport is considering contingency plans to divert aircraft to other UK airports or EU hubs if queues at the border become too long. The airport has seen queues of up to 6 hours at the border over the last few months as the number of checks and paperwork for UK arrivals increased. The airport's chief operating officer has previously warned passengers could be held on planes to prevent crowding. This would take measures a step further as a potential last resort. The airport wants to see more staff processing passengers at the border and for passenger locator forms that all passengers must now show on arrival to be automated so that passengers could use the e-gates. The airport wants to... a Heathrow spokesperson said that ahead of telling passengers to brace themselves for a long wait in immigration queues, Border Force could step up its efforts to automate checks for green list countries and put in place additional resources for passengers where manual checks might be needed. Accepting delays is a further demonstration of complacency from them on the matter. There are other protocols in place to hold passengers on planes or divert them to other airports to prevent excessive, unnecessary and completely avoidable queues in immigration halls. The sort of story goes on there, but the only trouble is I guess it's not so bad if you get diverted to Gatwick, but what if you get diverted to somewhere like Southend or sort of even Stansted, to be fair, because you're quite a way out of London. I had that once in the weather where I was supposed to be arriving at Stansted, but I ended up in Manchester and then had to find my way. My car is at the wrong airport. It's there are some issues with that really, but it's just.
What do you think, Bob, about queuing?
Well, I'm afraid it's inevitable for the moment, but I'm sure people are working very hard to make it as easy as possible.
I mean,
Mindful of keeping people safe and that.
again, yes, it's all about keeping people safe, isn't it? And I suppose the other problem is we're in unprecedented times, aren't we? So, systems to handle stuff like this are in the process of being developed, and with any agency, these things take time, don't they?
Nev, you've got a follow-up from Pratt & Whitney story we had a few weeks back, haven't you?
Yes, indeed. This is on the kfgo.com website via Reuters, and it says that the head of the FAA said on Wednesday that the agency is going to mandate strengthening a key part on Boeing 777 planes with Pratt & Whitney engines, like the one involved in an emergency landing in February. FAA Administrator Steve Dixon told a US House committee that the agency is requiring the manufacturers to address strengthening the cowling. He also said that the agency was working with Boeing and Pratt & Whitney to ensure that the structure around the engine, the cowling and the inlet area does not damage the aircraft structure. United Airlines 777 Pratt & Whitney 4000 engine failed shortly after takeoff from Denver on February the 20th, showering debris over nearby cities, but no one was injured and the plane safely returned to the airport. The FAA in February ordered immediate inspections of 777 planes with these engines before further flights, after the NTSB found a cracked fan blade on the United engine was consistent with metal fatigue. Boeing said on Wednesday that it continues to work with the FAA on potential design improvements for the inlet and fan cowlings. This work is exacting and time consuming, and we are giving the technical teams the time they need to ensure their designs address learnings, provide the expected performance and maintain overall safety. United is the only US operator of 777s with the Pratt & Whitney 4000 engines, and has a total of 52 of these aircraft and is working to resume flights. So that's quite interesting, isn't it? This is obviously an engine that's been in service for quite a long time, and only now, because of this, they're having to address some quite serious concerns about it. So, but that's what safety is all about, isn't it? Lessons being learned and improvements all the time.
Indeed.
Obviously, you followed this one, Bob. You saw the incident.
Yes, yeah, it is interesting. I haven't read the report or seen it, but I wonder what the initiator of the fatigue was, because of course there's going to be a two-pronged attack. One, stop it getting worse. In other words, the guards and the cowling or whatever they're talking about. But also, what can you prevent causing it in the first place? So if it's FOD or something like that, you may have to address those sort of things.
I mean, again, I appreciate you can't sort of comment on things specifically, but I mean, part of me sort of feels like this was quite a rare incident.
Yeah, so we do have a sort of saying in the branch that a single accident doesn't make for good recommendations.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
It can you can sort of what's the word I'm looking for? It sort of spoils the situation, if you like, if you take action on something where it is just a one-off.
Yeah. And that must be a difficult call, really, I suppose. I mean, unless it's something that's really obvious, where you think, yeah, that is clearly as a result of something. I mean, as you say, I guess you're almost having to let like a one-off sort of slide and just monitor the situation, I guess.
That's right. But of course, that would have been the action taken, the recommendation made would have been the result of hours of discussion at all levels within the NTSB, and of course the same with the Aaaib.
Yeah.
Any recommendation is really discussed in depth before it makes the press or makes the print, if you like, to make sure it's viable, sensible, will work, and can be carried out.
Wow.
So the next story is coming to us from the aviationherald.com, Simon's awesome site, which many of us use here on the show. And it'd be interesting to hear Bob's thoughts on this one. But this one, the Key Lime accident, which happened earlier this week, which I think definitely left many of us with open jaws, I think.
Yeah. But
a Key Lime Air Swearingen SA-226TC Metro 2, registration November 280 Kilo Lima, performing flight KG 970 from Salida County to Denver, Continental with one crew was on a visual approach to Centennial's runway 17 left. It was cleared for the approach and was descending through 6,400 feet, about 3 nautical miles north of the threshold of runway 17 left, at around 11:24 local time. A private Cirrus SR-22, registration November 416 Delta Juliet, with 2 people on board, was cleared for a visual approach to runway 17 right and was advised of the traffic landing on the parallel runway. And the Cirrus descended through 6,400 feet, about 3 nautical miles left of the runway of threshold, or rather threshold of runway 17 right, but overshot the centre lines of both runways 17 right and 17 left. The 2 aircraft collided. The Cirrus apparently struck across through the fuselage of the Metroliner just above the wings, taking out the whole top section of the cabin. At that point, the Metro crew declared an emergency on tower frequency, reporting their right-hand engine had also failed, and reported they saw another aircraft on parachute going down. After landing, the crew advised it had been definitely in a mid-air collision. The Cirrus pilot activated the parachute or the cap system and landed in a field nearby with no injuries. The crew of the Metroliner managed to land the aircraft at Centennial Airport, and the Cirrus, with 2 people on board, ended up around 2.7 nautical miles north of the runway 17 left in the area of the Cherry Creek Reservoir. The local sheriff's office gave the location of the Cirrus between East Bellevue Avenue and South Cherry Creek Drive. The sheriff's office stated the other aircraft was carrying cargo only and was flown by a single pilot. Again, there were no injuries. Obviously, the NTSB obviously opened up their investigation and are dispatched investigators to the site. So that happened earlier this week, and I'm sure we all saw the pictures. And there's also a video as well, which someone posted on Twitter, I know, of the Cirrus coming down with the parachute above. But what were your thoughts on this, Bob, when this news broke this week?
Well, first of all, astonishing that nobody was killed.
Incredible.
And that's great.
Yeah.
So the NTSB have got 3 people to talk to, but they've got so much to work with on what went right, not just what went wrong.
Yeah.
And the I don't know the full facts, but the single pilot in the larger aircraft, that's an astonishing piece of airmanship to hold it together, as it were, literally, and land safely.
I mean, that must have been a real challenge for, as you say, because the body has been compromised. I mean, how on earth you're able to keep control of something like that? While I mean, it's just astounding, isn't it? It's a real testament to the pilot's skill, I think.
Yes, yeah, indeed.
Actually, in the chat room, Captain Cruz points out the Metroliner is of a 1978 vintage.
Wow.
So it's so yeah. Again, it is. It did take a hell of a beating and carried on going. I think that's a testament to these older aircraft. I think sometimes we can say that they're built to
last. Yes,
of slightly thicker.
Yeah.
Aluminium.
Built to last. That's what we'll say on that one. Yeah, built to last. Oh dear.
No. So moving on to the next story, and Nev, you've got something involving Concorde.
Yes. Just before I do that, Micah in the chat room, our colleague from the US East Coast, says, "Can we have Bob on every week so that he can, in that way, we can get his opinions on all of these stories as they come up?"
Absolutely.
I'm sure that his fee would be.
Yes.
We'll be arranging a contract.
Yeah.
We'll arrange a contract after the show.
Yes. Right. Good. Okay. Yeah. Right.
Very
Bob.
good.
Yes.
Well, this is on the pointsguide.co.uk, and it says that the Concorde room is the most exclusive British Airways lounge inside Terminal 5 at Heathrow Airport. The lounge is known for its first-class dining, amenities and premium experience. And now BA has added a bit of aviation history to the lounge's decor. The actual nose from one of its fabled Concorde jets. The airline has moved just the nose of Concorde, which is more than 13 feet in length from its waterside headquarters to its new home in the terrace area of the Concorde Room Lounge. Workers carefully packed up the distinctive piece of aviation memorabilia during an evening shift, strapped it securely to a rolling pallet and transferred it to the lounge. It's now on display for avgeeks with access to the lounge to enjoy an up-close look. The slanted nose was one of the unique design aspects of Concorde, which obviously was the supersonic passenger jet from 1969 that could make the flight from London to New York in less than 3 hours, half the time of a typical transatlantic flight. The Concorde obviously last flew in 2003, so seeing part of the aircraft at the BA Concorde Room is the closest many of us will get to that jet. And of course, I don't have enough points to get into the Concorde.
Yeah, that's
I
actually
I was
one
going
of
to
the.
ask that question.
This is one of the questions I asked Nev the other day, and I said, obviously, Nev with his diamond encrusted BA card.
Yes.
I thought Nev would have access literally to the entire.
The gold card does not allow you into the Concorde Room unless you've got a certain number of points, and I am way off that, I'm afraid.
Oh dear.
So we'll just have to point at it from the outside and stuff like
and
that.
go, isn't that pretty?
Actually, Bob, when you're obviously, because you have to, I suppose you have to fly sometimes to get to certain investigations. Do you get put into first class and business class?
It depends what we're doing. If we need to be hitting the ground running, then we will go in a mode of transport that will get us there, so we can hit the ground running. That's what it's
Right. Okay.
But I must remind you, I'm a civil servant of a government.
So it's a 1953 Cessna 1.
Yeah, quite. Yeah,
all the bus.
Yeah, absolutely. Public transport all the way. Oh dear. Right, on to the next story. This is on thetraveller.com.au, and the headline is maskless JetBlue airline passenger who blew nose into blanket cops a $13,574 fine. So the US Federal Aviation Administration announced this week that it had proposed a civil penalty of $10,500 against a JetBlue passenger whose disruptive behaviour on a flight included coughing and blowing his nose into a blanket. The FAA alleges that the passenger repeatedly ignored and was abusive to flight attendants who instructed him to wear a face mask. The agency said in a news release the passenger's disruptive behaviour diverted the flight crew members from their duties. It was just the latest announcement from the FAA, which has been cracking down on passengers who refuse to wear face masks and otherwise disrupt crew members. US Airlines has reported around 1,300 cases of unruly passengers to the FAA since February, a huge spike compared to earlier years. The agency said that it had identified potential violations in about 260 cases and had notified passengers of enforcement in around 20 cases. A number of additional enforcement actions were in the works, the FAA said. In March, the agency extended a zero tolerance policy for unruly passengers and was first announced back in January. The Transport Security Administration last month extended its mask orders for people in airports and on airplanes, trains and buses throughout September. I mean, I'm sure there are incidences of this nature here in the UK, but I just don't understand why people have to be so difficult.
It's an expensive nose blow.
It is a very expensive nose blow.
I'm intrigued as to how they came up with a figure of 13,000.
Well, it was $10,500 but because it's from an Australian website,
it's a lot of money for blowing your nose, though.
It is. I mean, but then we've said this time and time again. You need to listen to your cabin crew, and if they ask you to do something, you need to do as you're told. You know, I don't think
what
being asked to wear it.
Another one of these comical stories from.
It is. I mean, it's social decency and common decency. It's maybe just a sort of figure that was chosen to teach an individual a lesson.
Definitely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Standards.
I mean, you wouldn't get it on a BA flight, that's for sure. Hey, Nev.
I can't even find the words to describe how awful that would be, Carlos. Absolutely.
True. Okay. So that's it for the commercial this week. Don't panic. We're going to. We've still got some military that we're going to do. So
we have,
yeah. So let's. He says he's trying to find the right thing. Let's do that now, shall we?
Let's go.
For this first military story, the U.S. Air Force has awarded one of its pilots for skillfully landing a damaged aircraft without a cockpit canopy or working landing gear after what the service is calling a catastrophic failure. Captain Taylor Bai, a 75th Fighter Squadron pilot, pulled off an emergency belly landing in her A-10 Thunderbolt II attack aircraft in April 2020 after an unexplained gun malfunction over the Grand Bay Range at Moody Air Force Base in Georgia that sent panels and her cockpit canopy flying and prevented her landing gear from deploying. The 23rd Wing at Moody Air Force Base announced on Friday that Bai had received the Air Combat Command's Airmanship Award because she, quote, managed to skillfully and safely land her A-10 with minimal damage, despite the challenges she faced in the air. So Bai recalled in an Air Force statement that when things started going wrong, she pulled away from the ground, she checked her engines, which were both working, then she slowed the aircraft down to allow her wingman, Major Jack Ingber, to inspect the damaged aircraft. Major Ingber said that in a statement that it was his job to think of everything that Bai had not, because she has, as he said, a massive handful of airplane that is literally falling apart. So after determining what was wrong, Bai had to figure out how to land the airplane. She lowered her seat to shield herself from the wind, which was somewhere around 350 miles per hour, and of course that made it difficult to see the runway. She was thinking, where's the ground? Where's the ground? She said she was also holding her breath at that point. Lieutenant Colonel Stephen Joka, the 75th Fighter Squadron commander, said in a follow-on statement, what's most important is preventing the total loss of the A-10, or even worse, her life. And that's exactly what Captain Bai managed to do. Though such occurrences do happen, they are pretty rare, but this is just another testament as to the quality of the training for these aircraft, the aircraft themselves, and then the fighter pilots that fly them.
I mean, it's like we were saying earlier, isn't it? It's a testament to the incredible skills of the pilot that this, wasn't a worse incident, shall we say?
Yeah, landing without or not having a canopy. I mean, most people have flown or say Armando's flown in a Boeing Stearman, which is obviously has no canopy as
windy,
such.
I think,
with the wind in your hair. But that aircraft is traveling at sort of 90 to 100 knots thereabouts. Yeah. This is something obviously a lot faster, but yeah.
Indeed. Yeah.
So Armando's got another story, and this one is all about Germany replacing their P-3 Orions.
In this next story, Germany is set to replace its P-3 Orion maritime patrol aircraft with the Boeing P-8 Poseidon. The selection of the P-8 Poseidon emerged during a parliamentary session after the United States approved a possible foreign military sales deal of up to 5 aircraft to Germany. The Bundesministerium der Verteidigung, the German Federal Ministry of Defense, is looking for to the Boeing P-8 Poseidon as a temporary replacement for its aging fleet of Lockheed P-3 Orion maritime patrol aircraft. That's according to Parliamentary State Secretary Thomas Silberhorn. Well, Silberhorn was quoted in the German newspaper Behördenspiegel, and he answered questions to members from the Bundestag on behalf of the Federal Minister of Defense about proposals from Boeing in the U.S. and from France. So answering specifically to Boeing's proposal, which would make Germany the third operator of the P-8 on the European continent, the Poseidon was described as an equal replacement for the Orion. The quote from the Bundestag said, the capabilities of Boeing's P-8 Poseidon weapon system basically correspond to those of the P-3 Orion. Only the P-8 Poseidon weapon system could ensure a seamless and timely capability transition if a foreign military sales contract were concluded before the summer break in 2021. So the possibility of operation for an interim period in the overall system of the Bundeswehr using the existing infrastructure of the base at Nordholz would be given. That's a loose translation. So the U.S. Department of State has already approved this possible foreign military sales deal of the 5 P-8s to Germany. They did that in March of 2021 for an estimated total cost of $1.77 billion US. The selection of the P-8 Poseidon is not an isolated or a surprise acquisition for Germany. Last year, the German Air Force decided to replace part of its Tornado fleet with around 30 FA-18 Super Hornets and 15 EA-18 Growlers to replace that nuclear capability of the Tornado IDS and the electronic warfare capability of the Tornado ECR, respectively. The choice was due to the faster integration of the B-61 nuclear bomb on the American-made aircraft, which forced a change in the initial plan to replace the entire Tornado fleet with the Eurofighter Typhoon. So additionally, this is a story we're still working on, India has been approved to buy 6 more P-8 maritime patrol aircraft for the cost of $2.42 billion US. That's a story we'll follow up on and have more information in the future. So it's not all doom and gloom for Boeing. They're still doing great with their military sales.
There we go.
Thanks for that, Armando. I was just saying to the guys, we're very lucky to talk to the P-8 Poseidon crew a few years back at RIAT, but they wouldn't let me on board with cameras, which was a bit upsetting. But
I think
there
they've
we
met
go.
you before, that's why.
They had done, yeah.
Yeah.
So this next one from Armando is all about another aircraft that I saw four years ago, I think, at the Dubai Air Show, and this is all about the Air Tractor.
Oh, the Air Tractor, wow.
We've talked quite a bit about the light attack aircraft program over the last couple of years, but the manufacturer Air Tractor has teamed with L3 Harris Technologies on the AT-802 Skywarden. That's a new variant of its light attack aircraft. Now, for a decade, Air Tractor has marketed the AT-802, but the Skywarden nomenclature reflects L3 Harris's contribution to the project. The combined offering comes ahead of a U.S. Special Operations Command planned armed overwatch program, which is supposed to host aircraft demonstrations in 2021, and that's to find a new light attack aircraft. The command is interested in buying up to 75 total aircraft to replace the U-28A Draco, which is an intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance turboprop based on the Pilatus PC-12 platform. So L3 Harris said it has designed the Skywarden using a team of former special operations aviators. However, the company declines to say if it would participate in the actual armed overwatch program for SOCOM. So in a statement, they said that the Skywarden is a modular open system designed to enable any customer to be successful in supporting and countering violent extremist organizations anywhere in the world. And that's from L3 Harris themselves. Now, the AT-802 or the Air Tractor is known as a crop duster, or as AT-502. The Skywarden is based on a firefighting version of that aircraft. This new aircraft will feature L3 Harris's communications and ISR equipment. Those products include electro-optical and infrared ball turrets or police cameras, a mission management software, multi-channel radios, tactical radios, a bomb release system, and a tactical airborne navigation system. Now, the two companies claim that the AT-802 Skywarden features the, quote, largest payload capacity of any single-engine turboprop aircraft. This aircraft has a 6,000-pound flexible combat loadout and a 6-hour loiter capability at around a 200 nautical mile combat radius. Now, it's also capable of taking off and landing on rough airstrips. The AT-802 Skywarden would actually come with 8 wing hardpoints and carry up to 500-pound class bombs to center line hard points to carry additional bombs, and an innermost wing station optimized for guns ranging from a 50 caliber up to a 20 millimeter. Picture distributed by the companies shows the aircraft actually carrying 2.75-inch rockets in pods under its hardpoints. Now, there was a previous attempt by the Air Tractor to sell a light attack aircraft to the U.S. government, and that failed. The company pitched the AT-802 for the U.S. Air Force's light attack aircraft program, but it was reportedly rejected due to the lack of having an ejection seat. Now, in the show a couple years ago now, I think we talked about similar aircraft from a company called IOMAX, which was designed to basically fit in a shipping container, be able to be shipped on a C-17 and put anywhere in the world with essentially a minimal manpower footprint, minimal maintenance, and be able to conduct missions in austere environments. So two big giants in the aerospace industry, and we'll see how these two companies come together to make this work.
I think Tony S. summed it up in the chat room. It looks like something from the 1950s.
So this is so they're like a crop dusting version. Is that what they're more familiar? People are more familiar with in the States and things.
They're more familiar with these being crop dusters. If you Google these, that they look identical to this military version as here, just with less bombs and machine guns and stuff underneath the wings and stuff. But they're an awesome bit of kit. I've been up close and personal with one of these at Dubai a few years back, and they are really menacing to see.
Yeah, I bet.
Close up. Yeah, I wouldn't want to annoy the pilot in one of these.
No, absolutely. No. Yeah.
So
it's the array of weird stuff that you can attach to it that is just sort of boggling, really. Yeah. It's just bizarre.
But on our last video from Armando this week, he chats to us quickly about a brief description about the EAA Adventure.
Guys, as I sit here on the grounds of EAA Air Venture in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, the United States Air Force Special Operations Command is supposed to bring a wide spectrum of its aircraft designed for unique missions as part of its presence here at EAA Air Venture in Oshkosh from July 26th to August 1st of this year. In a statement from the EAA, they said, "We've solidified the roster of aircraft from AFSOC this year, and the variety is truly impressive." That's according to Rick Larson, EAA's Vice President of Communities and Member Programming. He actually coordinates Air Venture's features and attractions. He goes on to say that each one of these aircraft has a distinctive mission and a role within AFSOC. All of those stories will be told at Air Venture 2021. Now, AFSOC, as we know, is comprised of highly trained, highly deployable airmen who conduct special operations worldwide. Airmen in these career fields have unique skills such as parachuting, scuba diving, rappelling, motorcycling, survival skills, and much, much more. Aircraft in the command include specialized mobility aircraft such as the MC-130s, the CV-22, C-146, strike aircraft like the AC-130 gunship, and of course ISR aircraft like the U-28, which we just talked about. Now, aircraft are scheduled to arrive here at Oshkosh on Thursday, July 28th, and remain through Sunday, August 1st. Now, there may be more than one or more of these models. The aircraft roster includes the AC-130J Ghost Rider, the MC-130 Commando Solo, EC-130, the CV-22 Osprey, U-28A Dracos, and C-146. So that's just a short list of the aircraft that will be here at EAA's Air Venture this year, and we're all hoping to be here.
I mean, it's so exciting. I mean, it's the dangling of the carrot of air shows again is just hurrah!
Yeah, I think EAA and I mean every blooming air show in the US we all want to go out to.
Yeah.
Oshkosh, we'd all love to go to Oshkosh as well, but we're going to have to plan these over the next sort of
I dare say in this one, because I think Armando is planning to go, isn't he? So I think I dare say we'll be well represented.
Yeah. So we're going to move on with the last part of the show before we start to wrap up, and it is, of course, our Caption This kind of just for fun competition that we have on our Facebook page. So for those of you who do follow us on Facebook, and if you don't, if you're listening to the audio show and you may not follow us on Facebook, look us up. But we are on there, and each week we run a caption this kind of competition where I put a picture of an interesting aircraft up, which some of you may not have seen before, and ask you to leave your wittiest and funniest caption. So this week, the picture, which Matt will pop up on the screen in just a moment, is...
I think somebody's been playing with Photoshop on this one, because the aerodynamics of this beast are not plausible. There we go. What a treat for everyone.
So, Nev, what would you kind of say this aircraft
Describe
is?
the picture for our audio listeners, please, Nev.
Well, it's an A380, but it's rather than just the 2 decks, it's got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 decks on it. So yes, very high capacity aircraft. And 6 engines as well.
Yes, I thought that was a nice attention to detail with whoever it was that was making it. They thought that looks like a heavy aircraft. Let's throw in an extra engine or 2.
Yeah.
What do you think of that, Bob? Would you think this would prove a...
It looks more like a cruise line. A cruise line with the air, doesn't it? You expect a swimming pool.
Yes.
Right, yes, absolutely. Yeah, you could have lots of showers and things on that particular one. It's very bizarre.
Yeah.
So we had some amusing comments in, so we're going to go, me and Nev are going to run through these quickly. And Matt, if you want to drop one in as well, you can, if you've got time with pressing the buttons.
Yeah, you're right.
But first one comes from Simon, the Qatar A320 or Qatar A3 or A380 bar taken to new extremes.
Never mind a bar, it looks more like a nightclub, I think.
Yeah. Nev?
Yeah, Chris says the A380-19 seats the same number of passengers as the original whilst meeting new social distancing guidance.
I like that one.
I like that one.
I do. That one's quite clever. I like Jacob's where it says it's the new A380 A3000. Quite like that. It's the A380,000, I think, is what that says on there.
Next one comes from Neil. He's taking us back to the 80s with this one. Feel safe on our new Airbus Carol Decker as you fly to China in our hands.
Oh, I see what they did
I
there.
see
Yeah,
what
it's
they did
very
there.
good.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I see what they
Very
did there.
talented.
Yes, good.
Nev, you've got one from Sean.
Yeah, Sean says that the Ryanair A380 arriving for the new paint scheme.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And John says, no, madam, you can't book a balcony seat. Like it.
Gary says, and this is lost on me because I haven't watched any of the films.
What?
Gary says Harry Potter upgraded the bus.
I should explain. It's a purple, but for those who have dinosaurs, that I don't know, it's a double decker bus, but it's actually a triple decker purple bus that's in one of the films. There you go.
Nev, what's from Malcolm?
Malcolm says that you'll find the pool and saunas on the top level.
Quite right. I think that's where we'll find ourselves. I think is on the top level. It's Nick says you'd never get me on the top deck. I'm frightened of heights. Good point.
Like that one, Nick. So Steve, this is a great one from Steve. Steve said Airbus scrapped its new A380 as it takes 10 hours for people to board it for a 7-hour flight.
Yeah. Indeed. Yeah.
And Darry says good old times when bigger and more engines meant better product. And I think there's a little bit to be said for that in some situations. Yeah.
Some guy called Neville said, "How are we going to get this into Gibraltar?"
More accurately, how are we going to get it out?
Get it in. It's the same with Norwich, isn't it? Yes.
Laura says when the cabin service takes longer than the duration of the flight.
Quite, yes. Indeed. And finally, Michelle says the first flight for Faro takes off from Heathrow on the 17th of May. Yes, it's like I think Portugal's going to be very busy by the sound of it, I think, as of Monday.
If one of those flew in, it would be.
Well, that's true.
Can you imagine the systems that would have to be put in place at Heathrow to board that aircraft?
Right. Okay. I mean, that'd be quite a stand, wouldn't it? I mean,
stand
need its own terminal, I think. Yeah.
Anyway, so thanks everyone for sending in your comments on that. Fantastic as always this week. There'll be another one next week, posted round about Wednesday, so keep your eyes on the social medias. So week ahead, what's going on next week, keep your eyes on the show for next Friday, because on next Friday's show, our guest is going to be Mike Ling, MBE, who is Blade 3 from the Blades aerobatic display team. He'll be coming on the show next week. And just for your information about Mike quickly, he is renowned as the Red Arrow's longest serving pilot. So he'll be on next week's show on Friday. So keep your eyes on there. So Nev, social media links, where can people find us on social media?
Yes, all you got to do is look us up on Facebook, Twitter or Instagram. Search for Plain Talking UK. Our WhatsApp number is +44 757 2249 That's +44 757 2249 You can email the show directly, which is podcast@plaintalkinguk.com, or our website, which is www.plaintalkinguk.com. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channels. You'll get notifications when we go live, and you can help shape the conversation of the show by joining us in the chat room. Just go to youtube.com and search for Plain Talking UK. And you can also find us, if you go to our website, you can use an Amazon link as well. And that pays us a couple of quid for your trouble when you do your Amazon shopping. And you can become a Patreon as well.
So there we go, our social media links. Don't forget, we'd love to hear your feedback, guys and girls, so feel free to send us your feedback in to our email address.
Just like Nick did at the top of the show?
Just like Nick did, yeah. So that's it. We're going to bring episode 367 of the show to a close. Big thanks to all our YouTube viewers this evening, and also our audio downloaders of the show. And a big thanks as well this week to our awesome guest, Bob. Thank you very much, Bob, for taking the entire Friday evening out of your time to join us on the show. We really do appreciate it. So from all of the team here, thank you very much indeed for your time, Bob.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So from me, Carlos, here in my home studio, from Matt in the PTUK studios, from Nev in his glorious Buckinghamshire stately suite studios, and of course from Bob in his home studios. Take care, everyone. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next Friday. Stay safe, everyone.
Bye.